All right, are we ready to get started? All right, how are you guys? Don't clap. You guys never clap. Don't do that just because we're streaming it live this week. All right, so look, I wanted to try something a little bit different this week, right? I mean, we do these Q&As almost every week. It's really important to how this place runs, and it's important, I think, to us not just that I have an opportunity to share openly what I'm thinking about, but one of the important parts of this is I get a chance to hear what is on everyone's mind, and that's a really important feedback loop for how we run the company overall. So this week we had this pretty disappointing event where we've been doing these Q&As for more than 10 years, and I'm super open and share pretty much everything that's on my mind at them. And the basic deal is I'll answer pretty much any question, and we try to keep that internal. But someone went and shared a recording of one of them. We think it was an intern because it was an intern Q&A that I did. So it wasn't one that was broadcast out to the whole company. But they shared that with a blog. And I think a lot of us internally we're pretty shocked by that because we want to be able to continue doing these and having them be open. But then we also had the second. I think a lot of people have the second reaction, which is like, hey, all the content that's in there, we stand behind, right? And this is all stuff that yeah, maybe I said it in a little bit more unfiltered of a way than I would externally, but fundamentally, it's like we believe everything that we said that was in there. And one of the things that a lot of people internally tell me is, a lot of, especially people who've been here for a while, is, they feel like there's this big gap where, I go out and I do interviews and I'm just like the worst at interviews. I'm like robotic and I don't think in sound bites, right? It's like, where do you go to plug yourself in at night to recharge? I don't know. I don't know. I try to talk to people. I do newspaper interviews and stuff like that. But then people don't really get to see me. And so people basically had this reaction. That people had told me this for years. That it's like, all right, if people could just see what we were like in Q&A and could see how thoughtful people were here, how much they cared about issues, and the hard questions that people ask, and the way that just a more unscripted version of me that. Maybe that would be good. So this is an interesting forcing function this week where this thing came out, and I was like, all right, let's try to run this as an experiment. I don't actually know how this is going to go because I haven't really ran this in advance to tell. I don't know how many of the questions that you're going to ask are going to have stuff that's like truly internally confidential, stats or things like that I'm just not going to say because it's a public thing, but it seemed like it was worth trying. All right, so we'll see how it goes. And I'm not making any promises to do this again in the future. I hope that you guys should continue to ask really hard questions like you normally do. For people who are tuning in on the live stream, we've basically tried to engineer these Q&As over time to get the hardest questions asked. So we do a bunch of stuff offline. Like before this, we actually have a poll that we run where anyone in the company can basically suggest a question, and people vote on what questions they want to ask, and then we'll start off the Q&A basically when I get to the questions by doing the top 5 voted questions. And the reason why we do that is because I want to make sure that actually I hear what's on the most people's mind and that I address the hardest questions that are out there. And so that's how we try to roll. But I don't know. Maybe this. Hopefully the unfiltered version is a little more interesting for people externally. And if this ends up being useful, maybe I'll try to carry this forward into some other communications and stuff that I do. But I guess at this point, it's like I do such a bad job at interviews that that it's like, what do we have to lose? All right. So one of the things that we've talked about a lot is. We have the 4 company priorities that are the major things that we work on, right? So the first one being making progress on the major social issues that we and the internet are at the center of. So it's everything from protecting privacy to election integrity and election security, and broadly supporting freedom of expression, but making sure that we keep people safe. Issues around data portability and competition, well-being. That's one set of things, and there's certainly a bunch of news on that this week, which I'll come to in a second. The second basic priority is around building qualitatively new experiences for people and teeing ourselves up, building the infrastructure to make sure that we can build qualitatively new experiences for people in the future too. So not just improving on what we do today, but delivering new things that are like, okay, this really made my life a lot better. It's like before there wasn't this product, now there is. I kind of live differently because of this. That's the kind of stuff that we try to do, and I want to make sure that that's a lot of our roadmap. So that's broadly a lot of the new work that we're trying to do on building a private social platform, right, to kind of complement the digital town square work that we do already with Facebook and Instagram. It's some of the future work that we want to do on commerce and payments. It's certainly the new platform work on VR and AR. And we have some stuff on that today that I want to get to in a second. The third category is just continuing to build on the momentum in the business. One of the things that we're really proud of here is that there are 90 million small businesses that use our tools. And the vast majority of them use them for free. Right? So we have about, what's the most recent number? 7 million active advertisers? Someone's got to know the answer to this. This is a part of the Q&A too. I don't know everything, so I kind of go to the galley a bunch when I don't. 7 million?
7 million advertisers, 90 million small businesses using our platform every month. And we've done survey after survey of them, of like, how is it helping them? And what's pretty interesting, and we've done the surveys externally, we've done the surveys internally, is that every survey I'm aware of, people will say that 50% of the small businesses using our platform, not just the advertisers, the small businesses, are hiring because of the growth they're experiencing on Facebook and Instagram. So we believe that we are a major platform for job creation, and it's pretty cool.
Awesome. All right, so that's the third priority. And then the fourth one is just trying to get out in public and be more transparent and make the case for why we're at the center of a lot of important issues, and we're trying to make sure that we address those responsibly. But overall, we think that giving people a voice and helping to bring people together is a massively positive force in the world, and we need to go do that. So you could say that trying to open up our internal Q&A is maybe a cut at that fourth priority, but there's a lot more that we need to go do, and that I personally need to go do on that. The big news, so I'll touch on a few things up front. So on the major social issues, there were kind of a few things that I think really struck me this week, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of these in the questions as well. The first was Attorney General Barr wrote this open letter about encryption, end-to-end encryption, and the risk that it poses to, if we're encrypting the content, how that's going to make it a lot harder to fight against real safety issues, right? So things like child exploitation, terrorism, real issues that we care a lot about and have fought for a long time. And I'm sure that there are going to be questions about that, so I'm not going to go into a ton of detail up front, but this is like one of the core tensions that I think we face. I mean, there are these different equities that we try to balance. Clearly, privacy has just been a huge theme for the company. It's been, it's an area where we're actively working super hard and trying to make a lot of progress strengthening our privacy controls. We're really proud of the end-to-end encryption that we've already rolled out around the world in WhatsApp. We'd like to bring our other systems around Messenger and Instagram direct into it up to the same level, but we get that there are real concerns with doing that. And a lot of times when people talk about privacy issues, I think the assumption is, okay, well, we want to be able to see all the data so we can use it for our business. And sometimes that's true, and we want to use it to be able to serve businesses and help the small businesses that we just talked about grow. But a lot of the time, it's also about safety. And one of the issues here is basically how do we continue making sure that we can push forward on the safety work, especially on some of these areas like child exploitation, where it's so terrible, the examples of what people try to do on across a lot of different services, not just ours. And we need to make sure that we continue making progress on that. We have a big effort that's working on this. There are a lot of things that we can do by trying to detect patterns of activity, by detecting bad activity upstream, by linking accounts together. So if we know someone's doing something bad on Facebook, we can often act on their account in WhatsApp, even if we can't see the content. So there are things like that. But this is really an important topic to make sure that we get right. The other one up front that was kind of top of mind for me is there was this European Court of Justice ruling on, it was a ruling on content and speech, which basically said that, that one country in Europe, presumably, can enforce its speech rules outside of the country itself, which I think is just a very troubling precedent to set. A lot of what we do internally is focused on giving people a voice, on basically enabling more freedom of expression and allowing people to express all the things that they want. And there are a lot of challenges to that. I mean, some of them are cultural. There are lots of safety issues. We want to make a welcoming community. And some of the stuff that people want to post there are real issues, and we need to deal with that. But there are also a lot of policy and legal issues around the world. And that's an area where we're constantly engaging with different governments and pushing back. And the current set of things that we do are when a government is democratic and has good rule of law, we generally will follow the local laws in that country. So if someone posts something, then we won't show it in that country if it's against the laws in that country. But we haven't yet had any precedent where any country has tried to say, hey, you can't do that outside of our country. Or we have had precedents, but we haven't, but we've successfully fought them. So this is one where a lot of the details of exactly how this gets kind of implemented are going to depend on national courts across Europe and what they define as the same content versus kind of roughly equivalent content. So this is going to be something that I would imagine we and other services will be litigating and basically trying to get to clarity on what this means over a long period of time. But I just wanted to register up front because I know we all talk about free expression and giving people a voice a lot as a core value, that I thought that was a fairly troubling development this week. And of course, because the ECJ is essentially Europe's Supreme Court, there's not like an appeal beyond that. That's the ruling. So now it's kind of just a question of how that will get interpreted. Going on to the second priority around new products and building new experiences, I thought we had a pretty exciting launch today with Instagram Threads. It's a good example of this privacy and private-focused vision that we have going forward, where we believe that the biggest areas of growth and ways that people want to expand, want to share online increasingly are around private communication, intimate ways of sharing with people, whether that's in messaging, in groups, and stories where the data doesn't stick around forever. That's what we're seeing across our products. Messaging growing quickly, groups growing quickly, stories growing incredibly quickly. So we're trying to work on a number of things, not just making the messaging systems encrypted and making it so you can reach people across them, if that's what you want to do, working on more ephemerality. But a lot of that came together, or some of the early pieces of that in this launch today, which is focused on communicating with close friends. It's trying to be a tool so that way you can as easily as more easily than any other app or messaging app that's out there today, be able to take a photo, send it to a close friend in a tap or two, have it be a kind of rich but private experience, and I'm just excited to have this out there and learn from it and see how it goes. So congratulations to the team that I know has been working on this for a while. I think it's really good work. All right, so I guess for people tuning in, we do two traditions at the beginning of each Q&A. One is a fix of the week, and the other is honoring people who have been working here for a while, Faceversaries, and I guess we'll take them one at a time. But the reason why we do the fix of the week is because the big stuff is always going to get a lot of attention, right? I mean, if we launch something big, that'll generally get covered. If we make a mistake, that will definitely get covered, and fairly. But I think what we all can appreciate is that it's a lot of the progress just comes from coming in every day, making things a bit faster, making them more secure, making the company work a little bit better, and then those just compound over a long period of time to add up to the quality and scale that we want. So that's why we honor a fix of the week every week, and this week, Wenjing Wan from Infrastructure Eng on the FB app messaging team is going to come up, and why don't you tell us about what you fixed?
Thank you, Mark.
All right.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Wenjing. I'm from the Facebook app messaging team. By the way, if you see some sunflowers in building 21, that's our team. Today, I'm going to talk a fix on messaging notification. The problem is that when people messaging through Marketplace or Facebook Stories, they won't get notified on the instant replies. The reason is that there is an old notification rule that intended to suppress the notification on your mobile when you are chatting on the web. However, this rule doesn't recognize the new messaging sources we added to the Facebook app, for example, Marketplace or Facebook Stories. We found this issue, and we fixed that by updating this rule to make it support the message from those sources. After the fix, we see the significant improvement in the meaningful conversations in Marketplace, as well as it improved the meaningful interactions in feed and stories. It also improved the messaging responsiveness. I would like to thank Yue and Shanli, who worked on this together with me. Yue is sitting over there. The last but not least, our team is hiring. So if you're interested, feel free to reach out. Sunflowers.
Thank you. All right, so the other tradition that we have is we honor people who've had faceversaries of 5 or more years. And it's because what we believe is basically a lot of the progress that gets made and the way that we serve our community at the quality and scale that we want is just a lot of stuff like this, right? Fixing things, making things a little bit better, and having that just compound over a long period of time. It's not always the kind of sexy big things that push the world forward. Most of it is just hard work. And that's why I just think every week it's important to just take a moment to honor people who have been working on serving the community and building these products for a long period of time. So thank you all. So within this, there's this special tradition, which is if it's your 10-year faceversary, you come tell a story. And I guess you really won the lottery in terms of weeks to come tell the story. But all right, so Brian Sa, you joined us 10 years ago.
Yes.
You work on the growth team.
Yes.
Moved to Tokyo when we were getting started with the office there, and moved over to the ads team for a bit. Yep. And since have moved back here and are now doing iOS development and leading a whole effort on that. So yep. This is an example of when you're here for a while, you have a varied career. You get to work on a lot of different teams. Maybe even start an office in a different country. But the work that you've done has been awesome, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your story. All right, thank you.
Thank you. So my story is about a special period in Facebook history when we sent a team to live and work in Tokyo, Japan. We operated like a small startup within Facebook. On my first day, I had to build my own desk. We had a sleeping bag in the living room, and we'd go on long coding binges powered by bottles of Japanese green tea. At night, we would sing karaoke in downtown Tokyo.
Yeah, I thought this might be where it's going. All right. Tell your story.
Then, on March 11th, 2011, a huge earthquake struck Japan. I was coding at my desk when my monitor started shaking. When I got up, I felt like I was on a moving ship. The whole room was shaking so violently that I thought the building might collapse. So I rushed outside, down the stairs, and out onto the street. The ground was shaking so much that I had to crouch in order to keep my balance. And that's when I looked up. And above me were power lines that were swinging wildly and threatening to electrocute me at any moment. Luckily, I didn't die that day. I posted on Facebook, "Huge earthquake in Japan," and all my friends from back home started commenting. I was able to let them know that I was okay, and a lot of people commented about how they were really happy to know that I was safe. At that moment, I realized how important Facebook was for connecting me with my friends and family when they most worried about me. This was also a turning point in my career. After this, I worked on Safety Check, and later notifications and other systems that deliver important messages to our users. I'm really grateful to be able to work on such systems that have positive impact on so many people, and I want to thank Mark for giving me the opportunity to work here.
Thank you. I want to say, we didn't give anyone here really a heads up that I was going to live stream this until about 15 minutes before, because I want this to be normal, right? I mean, that's the whole point is, in this grand experiment is to see how, if we can actually pull this off and have this, work the way it normally does while it's streamed. But yeah, all right. So so I guess we'll go to, let's go to the poll and do the top 5 voted questions. And then we'll go to the room after that.
Great. Number 1 question from the poll. Post-leak, please don't kill Q&A.
Yeah, no, don't worry about that. No, this is important. I mean, it's, I don't know. I think it's an important part of how the company runs. So we'll keep it doing. Keep doing it.
Hi, Mark. My name is Albert. I work as a software engineer in WhatsApp infrastructure. And this is something that I've been wondering recently. So tech companies come and go fairly quickly, but Facebook has enjoyed explosive growth for, well, more than a decade now. We've become a sizable institution and also one that's had a number of growth pains in recent years. So when do you think Facebook would start to sort of lose relevance? What could cause it? And how can we tell that the decline has or hasn't begun?
Well, so, I think the results that we have today are generally because of work that we've done, a year ago, a year and a half ago, laying infrastructure for things to grow. But pretty much as soon as you stop, at some level, if all that stopped, if you look at some of the progress that's being made, it's some derivative. I don't know if it's the second derivative or the third. Progress, you're immediately declining, right? So I think that this isn't a question of obviously different products have different lifespans and things like that. But overall, I kind of think that it's like building a company is a process of continual renewal, right? And building. And the same for products. And it basically, if what we build today doesn't work, then I think every day you're going through the process of declining and potentially reversing that and making it better. But I mean, just to put a kind of finer point on this, if you look at the list of the most valuable companies in the world, now versus 10 years ago versus 20 years ago, there's almost complete turnover of that list every 10 years. And so there's really, it's not even, it would be an understatement to say that there's not a guarantee that you continue to do well. It's actually, the norm would be that the companies that are leading in one decade are not going to be the same as the companies that are leading in the next decade. And if you think about just the phases that we've had to go through, every 10 years we're pretty different, right? It's, got started as a website for college students, 8 years later we're going through our IPO, and we're a bigger business at that point, but still not fully mobile. And now, now we're at the point where it's our apps are primarily experienced as mobile apps, and a lot of the things that got built in immediately around people sharing with bigger communities. The bigger part of what people do today is is increasingly around private communication. And so if you fast forward, right, it's the private social network stuff that we're doing is really going to be what the main experience that people have with the company is, 3 or 5 years from now. And with some of the work on augmented and virtual reality, it's we're making the bet that basically every 10 or 15 years there's a new major computing platform. There's Windows, and then the web, and then mobile phones, and there's going to be another thing, and we think it's just going to get more kind of immersive and giving us the ability to connect more with people and be more present. But I actually think the default would be, though, that if we don't nail these big things that we're working on, and if they don't end up being the right bets, right, and the actual things that are going to end up being most important for the next decade, I think the default would be that it's going to be different companies that are the biggest companies at that point, and not us or any of the other companies that you currently think of as on the list today. But I know today there's a lot of there's a lot of debate and a lot of discussion around the tech industry is very centralized. There are 5 big companies that are very consolidated, and I just would bet over a 10-year period that a lot of this gets taken care of through innovation and the market naturally working out. That's typically how it's worked in pretty much every all of the generations of technology that we've seen so far.
Thank you.
Great. Question number 3. How has the reception to Facebook dating been in the United States?
I think it's been pretty good. So we went out of our way to, we didn't launch it in the US first, right? We launched it in in a bunch of places around the world. Typically what we try to do is, the US is a big country. And so we try to test things in different places where we can get a sense of, okay, when if it works in a city or in a smaller country, then you can roll it out to some of the bigger ones. So I think we rolled dating out in, I think it was like 18 countries or something like that before we spent like a year or more working on it. Because when we roll something out, we want to make sure it's, that it's not just something, like we can put something out and people will, if we promote it, I mean, people will check it out once. But the really hard thing is building something that people get value from and come back to and use over and over again, and actually that adds value in their lives. And that's a lot of what we had to work on over the last year, is tuning the product, making it so that it really fit the need and was doing the job that people wanted it to do. And I think we're there now. I think it's more than 80% of people who use it come back week over week, which is what gave us the confidence to move forward and do this in the US. It's growing quickly. I think one of the differences between this being a truly public Q&A versus an internal-only one is, if this were internal-only, I would share the number. I'm not going to do that publicly. The team really did not want me to do that. But it's doing quite well, and I think we have I'm excited about the progress ahead there.
Great. Question number 4. 43% of software engineers list remote work as a critical factor in selecting a job. Have we considered this as a growth strategy? If not, why?
Yeah, so we've definitely thought about it, because getting as many really talented people to join the company and do all the work that we have to do is certainly, I mean, that's like a strategic priority. We're generally more constrained on our ability to recruit really great people than we are financially, based on like whether we would be less profitable or something if we hired more people. So yes, the short answer is we thought about a lot of things. But what we found works in our engineering culture is there are a lot of advantages to having hubs of people. And a lot of the work, people benefit from getting the context, getting ramped up quicker by being around other folks, being able to learn more from them. It's not that it's impossible to do remotely, and we'd like to work on this, but it's certainly harder. So what we've found is, not only have we so far not really done a lot around remote work, we also don't want to have a lot of small offices around the world. What we've typically done is, our kind of sales and partnership type offices, those are optimized around being in all the cities where our partners and clients and other folks that we need to work with are. But our engineering offices are really hubs, right? So there we have a relatively small number of relatively bigger offices. And the reason why we do that is because we found that people, that it's helpful to have the career mobility for someone to be able to be able to join, meet people on different teams, be able to switch different teams, work on different things if they want over time. It helps to have more senior leaders to run these, and you can get some of the best people when basically there's more scope and there are a lot of different teams going on. So that's really been the strategy overall, is growing that. At this point, we're growing primarily outside of the Bay Area. Obviously, we're still going to be growing a bit here, but the infrastructure here is, really tapped, right? I mean, you guys all see this, but it's, driving in. I mean, the housing prices are way up. The traffic is bad. There's a lot that we are trying to do to make it so that we can help build more housing, alleviate some of the traffic constraints, but for the near term, it's going to be building up some of the other hubs. That's going to be the bigger thing that we want to focus on doing while we're working through some of those policy challenges. The last thing that I'd say, though, is that part of the long-term vision around augmented reality specifically, I guess virtual reality too, is it delivers this experience and this ability to be present with someone no matter where you are. And one of the reasons why I'm excited about that is that right now, opportunity is not particularly evenly distributed, right? A lot of the jobs are in cities, but I really do believe that talent is more equally distributed, right? So there's smart people all over the place. And I think one of the values that you're going to get to eventually, when you can live anywhere that you want and be able to put on a pair of glasses or goggles and be able to feel like you're really present with people anywhere else, that'll be great socially. I think it'll also help people be present with the jobs that they want anywhere they want. So if you want to live in one state and work in a city somewhere else, I do think that'll be more possible. So the AR and VR teams, as we think about what the future of work is going to be and how that factors into the work, we are going to start experimenting a little bit more with remote work there. And if that goes well, maybe we'll expand it to more of the company.
Great. Question 5.
Hi again, Mark.
Hey. Wow, you won the poll this week.
So this is kind of a more lighthearted concern that occurred to me last week when a senator from Vermont said billionaires should not exist. As the only billionaire whom I can consult this matter on, Mark, what is your perspective on Senator Sanders' statement?
It's a good question. All right, so I understand where he's coming from. I don't know if I have like an exact threshold on what amount of money someone should have. But look, I mean, at some level, no one deserves to have that much money, right? I mean, that's not like I think if you do something that's good, you get rewarded, but I do think some of these, some of the wealth that can be accumulated is unreasonable. And I mean, part of this is why my wife and I started the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, our philanthropy, and pledged that we're going to give 99% of our Facebook shares away through that over our lifetime. But look, I think some of this gets to a deeper question where I think there are people who would even say, even that's bad, right? It's like there shouldn't be an accumulation of private wealth that allows people to, it's like we're funding science, for example, and it's like, and some people I think would say, well, is it fair that a group of wealthy people get to some degree choose which science projects get worked on? And I don't know how to answer that exactly. I mean, at some level it's not fair, but it may be optimal in that it's like, or better than the alternative, which is, I think the alternative would be the government chooses all of the funding for all of this stuff, which we kind of see. I mean, in science, you have like the NIH, for example, and it has a huge budget compared to anything that philanthropy is going to do, $34 billion a year, and and the way that it executes its budget is basically what you'd kind of expect the politically correct thing to do is. It gives out a lot of small grants in every single state and university around the country, and generally is not funding a lot of like really big projects. And I don't know. I think part of what makes progress happen is people taking different approaches to different things. And I think that the NIH is generally funding a lot of great work, and we're lucky that they exist, and I would like them to get funded more, right? And I've pushed for that. But I also think it's pretty good that there are other people out there who are trying different approaches, right? Who are willing to fund things and maybe take a bet. Like, one of the things that we're doing with CZI is we're funding this human cell atlas project. You can kind of think about it as like, when you first started studying chemistry, there's like the periodic table of elements, which says like, all right, here's basically the foundation of chemistry. Here are the elements, and here's how they interact. There isn't that for biology today, right? It's like no one has mapped out we think there's like 10,000 different types of cells in the body, and no one's ever made a catalog of all of them and how they interact, and what are the different states that they can be in, and how do you move them between different states. And that's like kind of a foundational resource that would help all of science improve, but it's a really expensive project, and the NIH, I think, is helping to fund it in its own way. But I think having some private funders take bets on that, and I don't know, maybe we'll get it wrong and we'll waste a bunch of money. I'm not sure, but I think having different approaches is one of the things that is valuable. And this is like, so I think that's what, I think you want a mix of public and private on all this. And I guess what I worry about a little bit when I hear sentiments like what the senator suggested is the suggestion that this should all be done publicly, I think would deprive the market and world of a lot of ways, of kind of a diversity of different attempts that can be taken. So I think you can think at the same time both that it's unfair that any individual might have that much wealth, yet still think that it's better for everyone, that there is certain choice and competition of the ideas that get pushed out there.
Thank you, Mark.
Great. We're going to go to London for the next question, and then mics in the room will be open.
Hi, Mark. I'm Emily from the Comp team. It was difficult to read this week's New York Times article about the crisis related to sharing pictures of child sexual abuse. Especially reading that, according to the Times, Messenger was the source of almost 12 million of the 18.4 million worldwide reports in the past year. I know that we've got a great force of people working really hard to identify and report this material, but our move to encryption is going to undermine the ability to address this type of content. What actions can we take as a company, in addition to the technical actions that you talked about in your intro, to counter the impact that encryption will have on the proliferation of this material related to the sexual exploitation of children?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, one of the, when we were deciding to go to end-to-end encryption across the different apps, I mean, this is one of the things that just weighed the most heavily on me is how do we make sure we do a good job on this while we're moving towards encryption. And certainly, being able to look at the content itself is one of the important tools for fighting bad activity. It's not the only one, right? But it's, for example, in other types of security challenges that we have, fighting things like election integrity, what we've basically figured out, or election interference, what we've basically figured out is that often it's not looking at the content that's most important, it's looking at the patterns of activity, and you can do that even in encrypted systems. But certainly having the ability to look at the content is a useful signal. And when you lose that, you're fighting that battle with at least a hand tied behind your back, and you hope you have a lot of other good stuff that you can do with your other hand. So we do a lot of work on this. And I think one of the things that these articles highlighted, I mean, you mentioned that we sent 12 million reports a year to NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And the reason why we're sending all of those is not, I don't think it's because the vast majority of the stuff is happening on Messenger. It's because we've done a lot of work to be able to identify this and send it to them. And that's, if you think about it, in the United States, Messenger is not the leading messaging app, right? So it's if you kind of think about, and the fact that the majority of child exploitation, I mean, as horrible as this is of a truth to confront, the majority of it is between people who know each other, right? A parent and a child, and an uncle and a niece, and it's so it's not necessarily. I mean, some of the cases are people getting connected and meeting online, and there's a lot of things that we can do there to prevent adults from reaching out to minors, and we do a lot of that stuff, and that generates a lot of the flags. But a lot of the stuff is, we can work on prevention up front. The reason why this is such a sensitive thing, and why I think law enforcement understands exactly what might go away with encryption now, is precisely because compared to some of the other services out there so far, iMessage and others, we've really focused on to date, making sure that we can highlight these issues, which I'm sure are happening on all of these different services. Now, that said, okay, so there's a bunch of things that I think we need to go do to mitigate this. If you could, to some extent, it's a service that we're highlighting 12 million of these to NCMEC. I think that they would probably prefer if instead of dumping a large raw number of requests, if we actually were able to get a higher signal and even send fewer things. So I'm kind of optimistic on this that we're going to be able to do a bunch of work to prevent more of this stuff up front, which we've already invested in, but we can probably do more of. Especially around limiting the ways that adults can interact with minors. We already do a bunch there, but there's probably more that you want to tighten down in an encrypted world. There's more stuff on basically being able to identify patterns of activity, or especially around sharing child pornography and things like this that are just terrible, that I think you can probably find through patterns of activity that we're going to ramp up investment of, and we're going to do that before we roll out end-to-end encryption on Messenger, because we know that this is a really sensitive thing to do. So we're going to do that stuff, and it's going to be informed by everything that we've learned so far. Now, with all that said, I still think that the equities are generally in favor of moving towards end-to-end encryption. The values of privacy, not only is that what people tell us every day that they want, it's what, as I said a second ago, the top messaging app in the United States is iMessage. It's end-to-end encrypted. People want that. But it also, end-to-end encryption keeps people safe in other ways, right? So journalists who are operating in countries where there isn't freedom of press. Think about things like the protests that are going on in Hong Kong right now. Regardless of what you personally think about that, giving people the ability through an encrypted system to know that they can organize for the ideas that they care about, and that the government isn't going to be able to easily hack into that, is, I think, a valuable thing that we should be proud of trying to deliver. I hear stories from dissidents and activists all the time who say that they would be in jail or maybe killed if they couldn't rely on end-to-end encryption. So there are, these are some of the hardest decisions that I think we have to make, is trading off these equities that are really heavy. And what I can commit, and the reason why we announced that we wanted to move towards end-to-end encryption a year or two in advance of actually doing it, is so we could work with law enforcement and work with NCMEC and work with a lot of other organizations around the world to make sure that we do the mitigation as best as we possibly can. Because we've so far been leaders in working on this and fighting it. That's why all those reports come from us, and we want to continue to be the best on this.
Thanks very much, Mark.
All right, guys.
On the topic of misinformation, talked with a lot of folks who I know a lot of us are concerned about the impact this could have on upcoming elections in this country and other countries. And misinformation comes in very different types, right, as you know. Viral hoaxes that look like they are legitimate news stories, but they're not. Images and videos that have been changed, provably false statements from prominent political figures. How do you think about prioritizing between these very different types of challenges, and how can we kind of leverage more the unique resources and skills we have here to make a difference on this?
Yeah, so to me, the new thing that the internet has created, well, I guess there's a few. One is basically the ability for a lot more people to have a voice. Right, so politicians have always been able to speak. There's a whole fact-checking apparatus around that that has existed, and I mean that's some of the most heavily scrutinized speech in the world already. But now, you have people broadly have a voice, and the other thing that I think is really important is that now, maybe for one of the first times in history, people broadly can share something and it can go viral and be seen by a lot of people. So that I think is generally positive. I think that there's a lot of great stuff that comes from that. I mean, we talked about response to disasters earlier, fundraisers, people being able to start communities and movements. That's some of the stuff that we're proud of. But then there's stuff that's bad, right? Where it's like people are sharing something that can be harmful, and you don't want that to get a lot of reach, right? So whether that's people inciting violence or spreading misinformation that goes viral but is like blatantly false, right? I think that when we talk about misinformation, I think a lot of people focus on a statement that it's like, is it clear if it's, is it a shade of true or is it partially false or what? There's a lot of stuff out there that people say that's just like completely false, right? I mean, there was a viral health misinformation hoax that was saying if you think you're having a stroke, you don't need to go to the hospital, just prick your finger and it'll go away. Okay, that's really dangerous, right? Because if that goes out, then now all of a sudden, you might have people who aren't going to the hospital when they need to get help. So for content like that, the main thing that we want to make sure that we get on top of, the top priority for misinformation, and really where we focus the whole program, is on complete and kind of obvious hoaxes that are going viral. And it's really hard to just get our arms around that. I mean, that's a big problem by itself. Most of the time when we're talking about that, we're talking about doing it in one country, but we operate in more than 100 languages around the world and a lot of different countries. So you need to kind of nail this and get that to work well. And that's the thing that I'm really focused on making sure that we do. Making sure that and at the same time, on top of that, I don't generally think that people want to live in a world where tech companies get to decide what is true and what isn't. So we have this program, we work with independent fact checkers, and we try to queue for them what is going viral and what's getting a lot of distribution, so that way they can get a sense of what's there. We try to give guidance. Hey, focus on the stuff that's going viral. Focus on the blatant hoaxes, not necessarily just kind of the day-to-day political speech that's already being scrutinized heavily. And I think that that's probably the most important thing that we need to go do that's additive to what is out there. It's not that that's the last thing that we need to go do, but I think that that's like by far the clear thing that is new, that's a new threat that the internet and social media creates, and that we have a responsibility to make sure that we can respond quickly to it and can make sure that that stuff isn't getting widely seen. So we demote it once fact checkers say it's false, and that we are very clear about labeling it, that fact checkers said that this is false. Anyone who does come across it realizes that what they're looking at.
Thank you.
Hi, my question is around Elizabeth Warren and her statements of wanting to break up big tech companies. You've made some statements about her in the past, and how are you going to stay impartial to what she continues to say about Facebook and still using our platform?
All right. Well, gosh, let's try not to antagonize her further. Well, look, I think that there's this is an important question, and I guess there's there's 2 points that I want to make. I guess one is principle and one is empathy. So the principle point. The value that we care about is giving people a voice and allowing people to express themselves. And I understand the concern that you're saying, right? So I think what you're referring to is the comment, I assume, that came out in the published transcript this week, where I basically was asked by someone, what do you think is going to happen? Will someone try to break up the company? I said, well, she, among other politicians, have said that this is their platform. So and I think the question mentioned her specifically, which is why I was talking about her. But if someone who's kind of pledged that that's what their policy is going to do, is that they're going to push on that, then it's likely that there might be a lawsuit, and we'll fight that lawsuit, which I think is what you're referring to. So I think I've seen some folks outside of the company too have asked this question around, okay, well, if Facebook is worried about Elizabeth Warren becoming president because of that thing, which again, that question was scoped to a specific policy topic, not like an opinion on the election overall or anything like that. But if we're worried about this, then how can we be trusted to be impartial and make sure that she and other people get a voice, right, and get a fair voice? And the principle here is, what we're here to do is give people a voice and help bring people together. And one of the issues that I worry about in the world today, that's the thing that's the thing that I care about. I think even when people disagree with what I think would be good and to happen in the world, I still want to give them a voice. I mean, that's what we're here to do. And part of what I worry about that's happening in the world is you have these norms around democracy and expression, which are like these deeply rooted things, which are that if in order for our society to work, we need to be able to put other people's ability to express what is important to them above our getting our preferences all the time. And I mean, to me, that's by far the most important. That's kind of what we're here to do. And part of what I worry about and the trends that I see is that there's clearly a trend where I think on a lot of fronts, people these days seem to be more willing to sacrifice other people's ability to talk, to try to censor people, because they view their policy outcome that they care about as a higher priority than overall kind of health of civic discourse or being able or respecting each other's ability to speak. And that's not the kind of company that we're going to be. I would rather have someone get elected, even if I disagree with them on everything, which I don't even think is the case here, than not give them the ability to say what they think. And so on principle, that's where we are. And I wish as a society right now that more people placed respect for their fellow citizens and respect for other people's voice and other people's ability to say what they think and make up their minds for themselves above getting whatever policy outcome that they preferred. I mean, we should care about the policy outcomes. I obviously care about a lot of things, both for Facebook and outside of Facebook, that we're working on in our philanthropy. But that stuff to me is all secondary to making sure that kind of everyone has the ability to participate in our society and in the democratic and civic norms around that. So that's kind of one point on principle. The second point is maybe a bit of empathy, which is, a lot of people in the country, especially people who are more conservative, worry that the tech companies are biased against them. And we obviously try to not be biased, right? But I can kind of get the concern, right? Because it's at some level, it's based on this question, right? It's the fact that I think we're here, we're in the Bay Area. It's an overwhelmingly progressive place, and I think people in the tech industry overwhelmingly donate to Democrats and over Republicans. So at almost every layer of the company, and not just our company, but the industry overall, people are expressing a lot of policy preferences that are in favor of one side versus the other. And I think for a long time, a lot of what we've been hearing is really a lot of fear, where it's like, well, how can we be impartial as a company at all these levels of our operation if people have policy outcomes that they prefer that kind of favor one side versus the other? So I thought this was kind of an interesting question when I was, and I saw a couple of people were asking this online, and I was just like, wow, this is such an interesting, this is a real moment where I think maybe we can empathize with how a lot of other people around the country feel, because this was just simply expressing one policy disagreement on something that happens to be quite important to us, but is a singular thing that thanks to the rule of law and all the court system, I think even if someone got elected who wanted to push on this, we'd be able to go to court, and I think we'd win. But the fact that raised this question of, well, how can we not be biased? I don't know. I think it's just a real moment for at least understanding where a lot of other people are coming from who have had this concern pointing in the other direction for a long time. And again, the principle that we have is around giving people a voice, around expression. That's going to be the primary thing that we care about. We're going to keep on pushing on that. We want everyone to have a voice. But I just think this is a good kind of learning moment to remember that.
Great. We've got our last question, Eliza in Seattle.
Great. Hi, Mark. I'm Elizabeth. I'm a content strategy manager for Marketplace. Like many people, I'm concerned about climate change and the lack of private and public investments to address it. We have the opportunity here to have significant impact. My question is, could we have a company-wide hackathon to address climate change?
I actually think we did. I don't know if it was only about climate change, but I think that there was a social good hackathon that we did. So, for those of you who are tuning in, we do these. A part of how we inform the roadmap, the product roadmap for the company, is we basically we have this process called a hackathon, where we give a day or a few days where all the engineers can basically put something together, throw an idea together. It's not going to be a fully baked idea, but you can propose something, and then at the end of the hackathon, everyone kind of gets together and people present their ideas and people vote on what they think are the best ideas. And then a lot of the best stuff that we've done as a company over time has basically started hackathons, then finds its way onto the company roadmap, and that's one of the ways that people here shape the direction that the company goes in overall, by illustrating ideas. We have this saying, code wins arguments, right? It's like you can argue about something forever, but actually going and sitting down and building a version of something that kind of works and that can illustrate what you're trying to do pushes stuff forward a lot. So the hackathons have themes, and one of the hackathons was around social good. We have a social good team that works on the disaster relief and fundraising and a lot of the different work that we're doing there, blood donations. And we want to get different ideas from around the company. And one of the themes, I think, was around sustainability. We also have a permanent sustainability team. And I think there were a bunch of things that came out of this where I think by far the biggest thing that we can do as a company is just use less energy. Right? Already, all the new data centers that we build are 100% renewable energy. That's a really key thing for us. We're not going to build more data centers that aren't fully renewable energy. But look, you can have 100% renewable energy. You're still better if you just use less energy, right? And make it so that we're just generating less waste as a company. So a lot of the work that you're all doing, whether it's directly going towards sustainability or just going towards efficiency in terms of how we operate, that I think goes in that direction. I don't know if anyone here was anyone at this. Does anyone want to talk about anything specific that came out of this hackathon? I don't know if we have. I don't know, Margaret. Do you have? No. Margaret's like, no, absolutely not. I don't want to talk. What? Are you kidding me? It's like, no. All right. Well, so yes, that's the basic answer. Have done, would do again. All right. Are we wrapping? Are we done? Okay. So we try to wrap up, each of these Q&As. We cover a lot of different stuff, right? We talk about our strategy, and we talk about internal culture, and we talk about stuff that's going on around in the world. But at the end of the day, the reason why we're here is to help build products that give people the power to express what they care about, to build community, and to come together. And I just think it's always important to ground these sessions with a story about how what we're doing is making a difference in someone's life. So we typically wrap up these Q&As by going to a story of how someone has found something how something have used our services for something meaningful for them. So let's go to it.
I've always wanted to swim with whale sharks. You just feel so free in the water.
It was beautiful. Realizing that I could be in this place, being very active and close to do outdoor activities, I thought that it was something that I would never do again.
These things, I just didn't think would be possible.
If you have the right support, you can overcome any situation. When I was 18 years old, I had a car accident. I had a spinal cord injury. From that moment, I have paralyzed my body from chest down. Everything from brushing my teeth to getting dressed to moving myself around is super hard. I had a lot of support of my family and I started reconstructing my life again. So I thought people with disabilities have to have experience as anyone else. Me and my good friend Camilo said, okay, let's organized the first trip ever of a wheelchair user to Torres del Paine. We started talking with the local travel services there, and they told us that you guys are crazy, like we have never seen a wheelchair here. We never thought that we could go to Torres del Paine. We opened an Instagram account, and our story kind of went viral. We started receiving a lot of requests of people with similar disabilities. We said, okay, we can do something even like bigger than what we were expecting. We have developed Wheel the World experiences in 13 destinations in 5 countries.
As someone who can't walk at all, and to get the opportunity to do this, I'm just so grateful.
We created Wheel the World to allow millions of people with different disabilities and their families and friends to experience thousands of places.
All right, have a good rest of the week.